Funding for Schaeferless is provided by the Mets, baby! Love the Mets! Let's go! They mentioned the Mets in this movie. 10 out of 10. Oh, sorry, I just spoiled the whole thing. My bad. This is gonna be a no spoiler review at first, aside from the Mets, because everyone needs to know about that. And then I'll let you know when I get into spoilers. As long as you've seen the trailers, I don't think this opening portion of the review will spoil too much for you. But if you want to be completely 100% blind, maybe just skip this video till you've seen the movie. Okay? Okay. So I watched Spider-Boy, no homo. I went in with the lowest of expectations because of my hardcore MCU fatigue from the breakneck pace that they released mediocre products this year. Plus, in general, I didn't think they could make a concept as big and ambitious as this work in a coherent film. It sounded like it was gonna be a mess, but I figured it would be an enjoyable mess since I do love me these classic Spidey villains. So I went into this expecting a not great, but extremely fun film. And instead, what I got was a great, extremely fun film. What a ripoff. Yeah, I don't know how they did it, but this movie's honestly really good. Certainly not flawless, it does have its fair share of problems. But the fact that this movie works as well as it does is kind of a miracle. I really liked how the opening act was paced. It felt like they showcased Peter's shitty life after being outed by Mysterio for the perfect amount of time, and then transitioned into the classic villains showing up at the perfect time. As far as those classic villains go, I'll admit they were kind of a mixed bag. Doc Ock was surprisingly underutilized and not that great in this film. He just kind of felt like a punching bag for a lot of it. Sandman and especially Lizard get practically nothing to do, which, like, I'm not really sure what you could do with Sandman given how his story in Spider-Man 3 ended, but as a result of that, his story is kind of all over the place here. Like, he only wants to go home and see his daughter, but then why does he do the things he does at certain points in the story? It's a little weird. I forgot the Lizard was in this movie at multiple points. You can take him out and nothing would change, but like, who gives a shit? Who really cared about his character anyway? Electro was surprisingly improved from his original incarnation, not only in terms of design, but in terms of motivation. Like, it's not amazing, but I do actually understand why he's aggro in this movie a lot better than I did in Amazing Spider-Man 2, so that's cool. And out of all the villains, Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin was pretty obviously the highlight. Just as menacing and sinister as ever, while also being an absolute blast to watch. I do wish he got a little more focus, but we'll talk about that in spoiler territory. Even though not all these villains impressed story-wise, their powers were all utilized really well in the fight scenes, which were pretty rad. The action in this really works for me, which is good, because it didn't really work in things like WandaVision and the final act of Shang-Chi. Man, Shang-Chi started out with such great action. Why did the fight scenes devolve into mediocrity as it went along? Oh well, Spider-Boy did it good all the way through. I like how subdued Doctor Strange's role was in this. It wasn't as hands-on as I expected, which is good because this is a Spider-Man movie after all. But at the same time, you still get all the cool benefits of Doctor Strange's side of the MCU, like a really cool fight scene and just the concept of the multiverse in general. Overall, there's a ton of fantastic stuff in this movie, but I think I'm gonna have to get into spoilers in order to talk about not only my remaining problems, but also the best parts of the movie. Oh my god, there's so much good stuff to talk about. Skip to this time frame to avoid spoilers. 3, 2, 1, Parker! You're fired! I do think this film drags a bit during the second act, where after Peter's captured all the villains, except Lizard, which Doctor Strange already captured off screen. See, I'm telling you, even the filmmakers didn't give a shit about Lizard. Yeah, after that and the cool Doctor Strange fight, they just kind of vibe in Happy's apartment for a while, making the cures for each of their ailments. It leads to a ton of fun interactions, but it does kind of feel a bit drawn out and a bit awkward at times. Not too bad though. Oh yeah, and I completely forgot, but the Lizard is just vibing in the truck the whole time. They really fucking hated him, didn't they? His motivations are just incomprehensible in this movie because they never want to have him on screen for longer than 15 seconds. Okay, but that's enough talking about Lizard, I swear. So the Goblin Man goes evil again here, and there's a fight scene, and Aunt May dies. Now, I never particularly cared about the MCU Aunt May, but at the same time, this development really worked for me because shit, man, that's Aunt May! Like, this is so effective because all of this is a result of Peter's choices. He's the one who chose to cure these villains instead of sending them home, which was a noble decision that even Aunt May believed was worth it in the end. But it cost her life. Like, there's consequences here. Real consequences. It's so good and compelling. This is what the best Spider-Man narratives are made of. Having Peter unable to save a loved one as a result of his mistake. Fans have been complaining for years that this version of Peter just feels like Iron Man Jr. and that his stories just aren't traditional Spider-Man stories. They're too intertwined with the rest of the MCU to really feel like his journey. See, I don't personally feel like that's a problem. I'm just happy to see a different take on Spider-Man than what we're used to, but I can definitely understand where those people are coming from. This movie feels like an answer to those complaints. It feels like they were playing the long game with Holland's Spider-Man and taking their time in making him resemble the traditional Spider-Man we all know and love. And I think think the wait was worth it because this story right here, this is a Spider-Man story, plain and simple. And actually, I want to go a little more in-depth about the Goblin, since he's the one who killed May after all. The way Norman Osborn is presented in this movie is super compelling, and it made me feel for him even more than I did in Raimi's Spider-Man. He's really played up as this timid, frightened old man who's been tormented by his alternate persona for so long and just wants to be free of it. That's how he's introduced in this movie, and it's genuinely really heartbreaking, especially so when the Goblin persona takes over and wrecks shit up. Obviously, he operated the same way in Raimi's Spider-Man, but the way it's presented here, his dialogue and performance, I don't know, it hit me even harder somehow. He was a great choice to be the main villain in this movie, and if anything, my biggest problem with him is that I wanted more of him. Considering the fact that he's the final boss Peter has to overcome, I feel like a couple more scenes with him were justified. Maybe one where Norman expresses remorse at killing May before the Goblin fully consumes him. Their confrontation does have a lot of dramatic weight behind it, but I feel like more scenes with him would have added even more weight to the proceedings. Okay, that's enough blabbering on about characters you know are in the movie. Let's talk about characters that you definitely never would have guessed would be in this movie. Toby and Andrew! Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone saw this coming. There's no way they weren't gonna bring them back if they were bringing back all the villains. But that doesn't make it any less cool to see them again. Toby is as great and delightfully awkward as ever. He hasn't missed a beat. But I'm shocked to report that Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was honestly the best character in the movie. Like, I was pretty indifferent to his character in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but holy shit. They took the crackhead energy his Peter Parker gave off and cranked it up to fucking 12. He's just so weird in this movie. And he has some of the funniest moments and line deliveries. My favorite line in the whole movie is something he says in response to Electro towards the end. Just the way he says it, it's so earnest, and that's what makes it so hysterical. But it's not just his humor that works for me, it's the emotion of his character. When he talks about the dark place he went to after losing Gwen, holy shit, man, I was actually invested. I was invested in the events of that lame-ass movie because there was a good story at the core of it, and this movie brought it out. It's like the prequels versus Clone Wars thing all over again. When he started crying after catching MJ, man, I started crying. Holy shit, this poor dude. Why was he so great in this movie? Toby's no slouch in the emotion department either, though. Just hearing that he and MJ did end up making it work after the events of Spider-Man 3 just really got to me. I'm so happy. I'm glad that even though Toby and Andrew only come in during the third act, they're definitely not simple cameos. They give them all the time I wanted from them without overstaying their welcome. Some of the casual conversations between the three Spider-Men can go on a little too long and feel a little overindulgent. I mean, there's a shit ton of fan servicey lines in this movie. Like, I get it, screenwriters, you guys browse r/Raimi memes, no need to flaunt it. But even when some of the fan servicey lines made me roll my eyes, I rolled those eyes with a huge smile on my face. They may have gone too far in a few places, but I had fun nonetheless, so I really can't complain too hard. It was so satisfying to not only get closure on Toby and Andrew, but for them to get closure with the villains they fought. It was beautiful to see them make amends with Electro and Doc Ock. Just fantastic. For some bizarre reason, Green Goblin didn't show up to the final battle till everyone else was defeated, and Doc Ock also showed up really late and didn't get to do much. That just felt very arbitrary and weird. But hey, that final confrontation between Tom Holland and Green Goblin was excellent. One of the best scenes the MCU has had in a long time. I mean, he was gonna fucking murder him if Toby didn't step in. You just felt his pain and angst, especially as Gabi started taunting him about it. Just so well done. And then there's the ending. Oh my god, I didn't expect literally everyone to forget Peter Parker. That's so fucking sad. He's practically lost more than both of the other Spider-Men combined. And again, it's so compelling because these all happened as a result of his choices. He chose to try and cure everyone instead of taking the easy way out and sending them home to die. Later on, he had another opportunity to send everyone home cured except the Goblin, who murdered Aunt May, and he didn't take it because he still wanted to save Norman. And that's what led to him having to erase everyone's memories of him. This is good fucking drama for a Spider-Man film. Maybe this will finally win over the people who claim that this Peter Parker doesn't have problems. Or maybe those people will just convince themselves that the next movie will immediately resolve this tragic ending by playing it off as a joke. I don't really care. It's not my business. At the end of the day, I really love this movie in spite of some of its problems. I wish some of the villains were better utilized. I thought some of the fan service could be a tad distracting at times. Sometimes the pacing falters a bit. Some of the characters' motivations aren't made entirely clear. But at the end of the day, who even cares, man? This movie delivered. It gave me so many satisfying moments that I'm gonna rewatch again and again. And it finally felt like a quintessential traditional Spider-Man story for this iteration of the character. This is still a great time. time, and definitely up there as one of the best Spider-Man movies ever made. 8 out of 10, would recommend. Also, we do this Hunger Games simulator on Chris's channel, Space Chris 7, every Wednesday night on stream, where we take random characters and throw them into a Hunger Games sim. For the quarter quell, I promised I would make a 5-second review of the source material for whichever character won, and the winner was Chuck, the evil sandwich-making guy from Word Girl. See, this is thematically appropriate, because Word Girl fights a ton of villains, and Spider-Man No Way Home had a ton of villains. Whoa, look at that. Makes perfect sense, actually. So here's my 5-second review of Word Girl. Ahem. Word Girl is a banger, way better than any show for young children should be. It's really funny. I want to fuck Dr. Two Brains. Good night, Tri-State Spider-Verse.
This go with myself?
That's outrageous.
And I will crush that Spider-Man, and then that other Spider-Man, and all the Spider-Man, till I'm the Spider-Man. Spider-Man, we're at it again. This time with 50% more Spider-Man.